Imhotep Nefer Mkemet. Welcome in great peace to Egypt. I am General Wendjebauendjed. You can simply call me Wendjebau. I served as a general, high dignitary, and high priest under the rule of Pausanias I of the 21st dynasty around 1047 to 1001 BC. Even though I wasn't a royal personage, the fact that I held such significant positions permitted me to get the high honor of being buried in the royal necropolis. I have crossed the time barrier to talk to you about the army in ancient Egypt. This will include the army divisions, the defensive and offensive arms, the military costumes, the tactics and strategies during the war, and the enemies of ancient Egypt.
Once again, I have crossed the time barrier to talk to you today about military tactics and campaigns of the ancient Egyptian army. The art and science of fighting battles on land and at sea were perfected by the ancient Egyptians. This was concerned with how warfare was approached, how troops and other individuals were positioned, how different weapons, chariots, and ships were used, and how maneuvers for assault or defense were carried out. The ancient Egyptians implemented advanced military tactics and maneuvers, contrary to many of their contemporary rivals. They utilized a combination of infantry, archers, and chariot-mounted warriors, exploiting the strengths of each division. In preparation for a military campaign to attack a foreign nation, each province furnished its quota of men. The troops were commanded by the king in person. In some instances, a general was appointed to that post and entrusted with the sole conduct of the war. They executed such plans according to a war council headed by the pharaoh, who was the supreme commander of the armies. The pharaoh, as both the political and military leader, devised strategies, relying on the advice of experienced generals and military advisors. These strategies included the use of surprise attacks, cleverly ambushing enemies, and capitalizing on topography to gain strategic advantages. The king discussed the defensive and offensive plans with his senior officers from all corps in the major camp before moving to the war destination. He would revise with his generals the readiness of each corps, its supplies and armors. Upon approaching the site, another war council was held in a special tent near the expected battle place. A place of rendezvous or gathering was fixed at Thebes, Memphis, or Pelusium. Here is the gathering of infantry and chariotry to the meeting place. That is the gathering of troops and mobilization in the camp before moving to the battle. The troops, having assembled in the vicinity, remained encamped there, awaiting the leader of the expedition. A sacrifice was performed to the gods whose assistance was invoked in the approaching conflict. Orders were then given for their march and a signal was given by sound of trumpet. The military band would then keep the soldiers marching in accordance with their enthusiastic music. The troops fell in and with a profound bow each soldier in the ranks saluted the royal general and prepared to follow him to the field. The march then commenced to the sound of the drum and the military band. The army then would proceed to the destined campaign. The chariots would then lead the van. The king, mounted in his chariot and attended by his chief officers, carrying flabella, took his post in the center, preceded and followed by bodies of infantry armed with bows, spears, or other weapons, according to their respective corps. On commencing the attack in the open field, a signal was again made by sound of trumpet. The archers drawn up in line first discharged a shower of arrows on the enemy's front. A considerable mass of chariots advanced to the charge. The heavy infantry armed with spears or clubs and covered with their shields moved forwards at the same time in close array. They were flanked by chariots and cavalry and pressed upon the center and wings of the enemy. The archers still galling the hostile columns with their arrows and endeavoring to create disorder in their ranks. The Egyptians spared the prostrate who asked for mercy. The Egyptians, both in ship and on the shore, are seen rescuing the enemy, whose galley has been sunk from a watery grave. Those who sued for mercy, and laid down their arms, were spared and sent bound from the field. The booty and gains were stored in an open space like an encampment, being watched by guards. It was surrounded by a temporary wall made of shields, placed erect, with a wicker gate in the inner and outer face of which a strong guard was posted. The guards were walking to and fro with drawn swords. The Egyptians were also very clever in attacking fortified towns and castles. The heavy infantry and light troops employed in the assault on fortified towns were all provided with shields, under cover of which they made approaches to the place. In attacking a fortified town, they advanced under cover of the arrows of the bowmen, and either instantly applied scaling ladder to the ramparts or undertook the routine of a regular siege. In which case, having advanced to the walls, they posted themselves under cover of testudos, and shook and dislodged the stones of the parapet with a species of battering ram. A special body of men were employed in this task. The testudo was used to conceal and protect the attackers. The testudo was a framework, sometimes supported by poles having a forked summit, and covered, in all probability, with hides. It was sufficiently large to contain several men, and so placed that the light troops might mount upon the outside and thus obtain a footing on more elevated ground, apply the ladders with greater precision, or obtain some other important advantage. Each party was commanded by an officer of skill, and frequently by those of the first rank. Here, the king's sons commanded the 4 testudos. They then opened forcibly the gates of the town or turned them down with axes. When the forte was built upon a rock, they climbed the precipitous part by means of the testudo, or by short spikes of metal, which they forced into the crevices of the stone and then applied the ladder to the ramparts. Ramesses III fought the sea people both on land and sea. He conquered them and took many as captives. The naval fighting techniques were tackled with the navy in a previous episode. The intelligence of the ancient Egyptian army extended beyond its organization and tactics. Moreover, the army possessed extensive knowledge of enemy movements, utilizing spies and developing effective intelligence networks to gather crucial information. Here, 2 spies of the Hittites were captured by the Egyptian intelligence. They were beaten to extract information from them. Another testament to the intelligence of the ancient Egyptian army was their engineering prowess. They constructed fortresses, such as the well-known fortress at BUHEN, strategically positioned along the borders to safeguard against potential invaders. These fortresses incorporated advanced architectural techniques and were fortified with walls and towers, showcasing the army's comprehension of defensive strategies and the need for fortified positions. The form of the fortress was quadrangular. The walls of crude bricks were thick and high with square towers at intervals along each side. Sometimes the whole wall was doubled by an outer casing. A space was left between the two. This space was filled in here and there by solid buttress, which strengthened and united them, and prevented anyone passing freely round the inner wall when the outer one was broken through. In large fortifications, a ditch was created with a counterscarp. Over the ditch was a wooden bridge which was removed during a siege. The intelligence was not solely confined to the battlefield for the ancient Egyptian army. They recognized the importance of logistics and supply chains, ensuring the provision of ample food, water, and medical supplies for soldiers. This level of comprehension safeguarded the army's health and morale, enabling them to remain combat-ready for extended periods. The captives of war were secured by handcuffs and were led to the monarch, guarded by the marching army. Their hands were tied behind their backs or over the heads, and a rope was passed round their neck, fastened them to each other. The captives were employed in the service of the king, in building temples, cutting canals, raising dikes and embankments and other public works. Some who surrender might serve as part of the allied foreign troops within the army. A wounded adversary, incapable of further resistance, having claimed and obtained the mercy of the victor, was carried from the field in his chariot. The ordinary captives, who laid down their arms and yielded to the Egyptians, were treated as prisoners of war, and were sent bound to the rear, under an escort. At the end of the war, the hands of the slain were counted by the military scribes before the king, and their number was registered to commemorate his success and glory. Sometimes their tongues or phalluses were cut. The booty, arms, chariots etc. collected from the conquered enemy were listed and presented to the king. The succumbed countries would send their tributes to Egypt. After returning triumphantly, a military parade would take place and the king would demonstrate the captives as well as the spoils of the war. The people would align themselves to salute the victorious army and celebrate the victory. On returning from war, the troops marched according to the post assigned to each regiment, observing the same order and regularity as during their advance through the enemy's country. The allies from foreign tribes occupied a position towards the rear of the army and were followed by a strong corps of Egyptians. Rewards were afterwards distributed to the soldiers, and the triumphant procession of the conqueror was graced by the presence of the captives, who were conducted in bonds beside his chariot. The army as it passed through Egypt was met at each of the principal cities by crowds of people, who were headed by priests and chief men of the place. They were bearing bouquets of flowers and palm branches to receive the army with loud acclamations. In the capital, preparations commenced for a general thanksgiving in the principal temple. Suitable offerings were made to the presiding deity, the guardian of the city and the giver of victory. Amon-Ra of the Karnak temple was the guardian deity of the New Kingdom period. The prisoners were presented to the god of the temple as well as the spoils of the war. A priest offered incense, meat offerings and libations. So, that was the last episode in a series that tackled the ancient Egyptian army, with all related topics since its evolution. The military organization, the defensive and offensive arms, the different troops of infantry, chariotry, and navy, the enemies, and the military tactics were all topics that have been tackled in these episodes. The military campaigns expanded Egypt's territorial control, secured valuable resources, and solidified the pharaoh's reputation as a divine and mighty ruler. The army in ancient Egypt stands as a testament to the military prowess, discipline, and organizational skills of this remarkable civilization. It served as the guardian Egypt, protecting the kingdom's borders, maintaining internal security, and expanding its dominion. The significant military campaigns of the great ancient Egyptian conquerors such as Thutmose III, Ramesses II, and Ramesses III still fascinate the entire world. But this is another story.
Make sure to tune in to my next videos. If you have any thoughts or questions, add them to your comments. Kindly press the like, share, and subscribe buttons. I'm Farag al-Sharabasi. See you in the next episodes. Thank you.